Welcome, welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Thank you. So, this is the Parsha Bechukotai, and this coming week, it's a double portion of Bahar and Bechukotai. They're the final two portions of the book of Leviticus. Gosh, we are moving so fast. And of course, Numbers is when summertime is when we read the book of Numbers, coming up very, very soon. At any rate, we have done all the Rashis up to this point. We completed Bahar, that deals with the sabbatical year to a great extent, and selling land, selling property, etc. And Bechukotai is that great blessing and curse that is mentioned at the end of book of Leviticus, and basically saying that there are great consequences to the decisions we make regarding our belief in a creator and our desire to try and perform the divine commandments, and that it's not like, do whatever you like, but there really are consequences. And I'd say that in the course of my lifetime, I've seen it, both blessing and the curse, as far as these are concerned. And I think it's all to try and get a sense of seriousness about this, because it's so easy to see this and sort of say, well, it's not that big a deal, etc., etc. So at any rate, and then one starts to make poor choices, and then one gets locked into things. So we're actually finishing up the curse. I'm happy to say that we've got a lot of it done at this point, and we're coming at this point to the end of it. And we actually see that God actually loves human beings, loves the Jewish people, loves the descendants of Abraham, and that despite the terrible consequences, which at this point inevitably are going to happen, nevertheless, this idea of God having this very special relationship with the Jewish people will continue. But we'll let the Torah speak for itself. Va'aretz te'azev mehem, so the land will be forsaken from them. Vatiritz et shabtoteha, so that it'll compensate for its Sabbaths. And we're talking about the observance of that sabbatical year when the land is to lay fallow, and that essentially one is to survive both from previous harvests, from the aftergrowth that naturally seeds itself, but the whole idea of calming down this whole business of life, right? The curb making life into one great commercial, nothing more than a commercial existence. But it's a tremendous spiritual discipline. At any rate, the fact that they did not observe these sabbatical years, and it's saying that those sabbatical years will be compensated at some point. So in why? Be bo shama, right? In mayhem, right? In that it is desolate. So obviously in this moment when the Jewish people have been exiled and cannot actually work the land, etc., so the land inevitably lies fallow and it doesn't get worked. Vehem yirtzu et avonam, right? And they will atone for their iniquities. Yan uvayan. So it's sort of like quid pro quo. B'mishpatai ma'asu. Why? In other words, because they rejected my statutes. Ve'et chukotai ga'ala nafsham. And literally it means their souls, they loathed my ordinances. So the whole idea, right, as I've said before, that the title of the land of Israel to the land of Israel on the part of the Jewish people is their commitment to laws of justice and righteousness, and laws that involve the sanctification of the human being, etc., etc., and its devotion in finding this way, this pathway to the divine, because the mitzvot are actually the avenue in which we connect to the divine. Let's take a look at the Rashi here. Yan uve yan, right? Literally, I think we could translate it as because and because. So he says gamu uve gmu, right? In other words, a recompense for one for the other. Asher b'mishpatai ma'asu, because they rejected my statutes. So because they rejected them, they will be rejected. V'af, going on, v'af gam zot biyotam be'eretz oivehem, right? And even the fact that they were in the land of their enemies, in other words, they've been exiled to the land of their enemies, lo ma'astim, I have not rejected them, v'lo ga'altim l'chalotam, and I have not loathed them, I'd say, right? Loathed them to bring an end to them. Lahafer brititam, to, in other words, to annul the covenant, my covenant with them. Ki ani Hashem Eloheim, because I, the Lord, am their God. So that's that statement. It's saying, despite that fact, God will not abandon the covenant, despite the fact that they're in such terrible straits at this particular point. So it's a very interesting statement in this regard. And of course, given what's going on at this particular point in our history, it's interesting to think carefully what's going on. For Af Gamzot, right? And this even this. Va'af afilu ani osi'imachem zot, hapuranot, right? And despite the fact that I am going to be performing with you this retribution, asher amarti, right, which of which I referred, beyotam peoritz oivehem, right, in the land of the enemies, when they are in the land of the enemies, lo Lo ma'astim l'chalotam. I have not rejected them to bring them to an end. Ulahafer briti, and to annul my covenant asher itam, which is with them. So again, gives us something to think about in terms of this agreement, this whole notion of a covenant and an agreement between the divine creator and human beings. Let's go on. Okay, let's find the place. Let's see. 1 second. I want to make sure I didn't go too far. Yeah, here we are. Sorry, I did go too far. V'zacharti, and I shall remember lahem, for them on their account, brit rishonim, the covenant with the earlier ones, the covenant with those who had come earlier with them, asher hotzeti otam eretz Mitzrayim, in that I had brought them out of the land of Egypt, le'enei hagoyim, in the sight of the nations, liot lahem lelohim, to be their Elohim, ani Adonai, I am the Lord. And this, of course, it reinforces this understanding of the distinction between Adonai and Elohim, and the notion of Adonai being our awareness of a divine, transcendent creator of the universe, and Elohim being the relationship we have with that divine creator, the understanding that we have of God as our judge, in accepting God's judgments both for and against us, right? And trying to have faith. And the idea, I think, specifically what it indicates to us is that when we face adversity, we should say, what do I learn from this? What is trying to be communicated to me? What do I need to change in myself and in my relationships and in my behavior, how I'm treating myself, and in relationship to God? So that's that notion of Elohim. And of course, they're two separate things. One is an intellectual awareness, and one is an emotional connection. So, but God will never abandon this idea, right? Brit Rishonim, right? Shel Shvatim, refer those early ones, those first ones, referring to the tribes. meaning the tribes, as because Israel became a nation in the land of Egypt, was forged into a nation as they experienced slavery in the land of Egypt. Eila hachukim v'hamishpatim, these are the statutes and the ordinances, v'hatorot, and the laws, but notice it's torot, right? Instructions, asher natan Hashem, which the Lord gave, beino uvein bnei Israel, between himself and the children, and between the children of Israel, Bahar Sinai, on Mount Sinai, biyad Moshe, through the agency of Moses. Take a, the fact that it says hatorot, right? Instructions, it's plural. Achat bichtav, in other words, this is sort of an implication of one of them in writing, the written Torah, v'achat ba'al peh, and one orally. Magid, and it says shekulam nitnu leMoshe b'Sinai, that the entire Torah was given, both the written and the oral Torah was given to Moses at Mount Sinai. Now, while it's possible to take the literal Torah and say that was given to Moses, Moses wrote down that written Torah. Nevertheless, the oral Torah is an ongoing process. And so I think we need to understand by that the principles by which oral Torah was to be developed was given to Moses. This all comes all the way back to Mount Sinai. And I think part of the message here, at least as I'm trying to process it, is to say that there is a legitimacy to the fact that we have to apply oral Torah. That if in fact we don't simply see these laws as being idealistic, right, up in heaven, right, would be another way of saying it metaphorically. And we say, no, they aren't just ideals, they're to be practiced. One has to have an oral Torah in order to be able to apply that written Torah to life's circumstances. And I'll say once again, as I say so many times, so the written Torah is about doing what doesn't come naturally. The written Torah is given to us because if we just followed our natural inclinations, we'd probably destroy ourselves. But we can actually apply our intelligence to our impulses. And if we're able to master our impulses by taking the lessons and the instructions of the written Torah and apply them, we can thrive. But at the same time, the actual application of these principles requires an ability to work with the various circumstances that life throws our way, and to know that the combination of these two approaches is one that can lead to an authentic service to God, and that this is the point of it. And I think since we are coming now to a point where we have a new chapter, I'm going to stop here and see if anyone has any comments for the record. And if it's a short lesson today, so be it. Any comments, guys? I'm going to stop the share.
Well, you said, we're going to be reading Numbers in the summer.
Yes.
So what struck me about this is during the counting of the Omer.
It is.
And I wondered if you had thought of a connection between that and if there's I guess I have Omer questions.
Okay, go. We did do Omer last week, interestingly enough, right? In that Parsha where it discusses the festivals, it talks about the counting of the Omer. So go ahead, Judith, please.
Well, I just, I'm this year I'm working with a group of people doing once a week the art of that week and that day and the intersection of them, which is a post-biblical development of what to do with counting Omer.
Yes.
But I wondered what you had do with the Omer, or what you come to think about it applying to ain't nobody gonna tell me what to do.
Yes. So Judith, people are going to think you're my shill, right? So something that I discovered And I guess we're still recording, but maybe I can pause the recording for a moment and get a Siddur and see if I'm capable of showing you on the camera because I don't have it, I don't have a picture of a photo of it. So give me a moment. Let me see what I can do here. Okay.
There we go.
So this is part of a service of counting the Omer. And the whole idea that the rabbis realize is that it's to connect the exodus from Egypt to the acceptance of the Torah. The idea of having that choice, and that it's saying that, moving from one to the other takes a period of time, and the idea of these 7 weeks in which to try and refine one's personality, especially on the emotional levels, uh, to 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 be able to be in a place where you can actually start to accept the Torah. And the whole idea emotionally to be in a place where you accept the belief in God and also the idea that we have this connection. So what I wanted to show you, you notice that I put in pencil all these numbers, okay? And what I noticed in some prayer books is that there is this psalm, right? Here it's Psalm 67, right? That actually in the number of words that it has exactly 49 words. 49 words.
Mm.
And not only that, it has a verse, this verse here, that starts here, up to here, that if you count the number of letters in that verse, it has exactly 49 letters.
Hmm.
Not only that, there's this particular prayer. This is a prayer, Ana Bakoach, that has, as you can see, 49 words. This is considered one word. These are acronyms. This is an acronym for these letters here.
Hmm.
And again, they talk about the 49 word of the name of God that comprises of 49 words. So the idea, and I'm going to show you another page. Let's see if it'll go here. All right, so here we go. These are the statements of each day, each count of the Omer. This here has to do with the Sphira. The Sphira has to do, the Sphirot is a mystical concept. It is actually, there's a statement in Chronicles where David describes God and says he has these particular qualities. And there are a total number of 10 Sphirot, but the first three Sphirot are considered intellectual, rational Sphirot, and the seven remaining Sphirot are considered emotional Sphirot. So the fact that there are these seven emotional Sphirot is understood mystically to allow the Omer to help us develop our emotions, because it's through our emotions, unfortunately, that we can start following our impulses. And of course, impulses and emotions are so locked together that being able to refine them is very important. So there are seven of these, and if you take a combination of each one with the other, so there's Chesed and Gvura and Tiferet, Netzach, Hod. These are those various seven qualities, and you take the first week is the week of Chesed, and the second week is the week of Gvura. So you have this combination of the first day of this week of Chesed would be Chesed Shebe Chesed. I hope I'm making sense to you, right? And then there's Gvura Shebe Chesed, etc., etc. And each pair has to do with ways in which one can focus. So Chesed essentially has to do with love, right? So Chesed Shebe Chesed has to do with a focusing on how loving is your love, right? How loving is your kindness? How kind is your kindness? Because you can express kindness for selfish reasons. And sometimes your kindness actually doesn't turn out to be so kind. There are things to think about regarding that. And the word gvura is understood as discipline, right? So discipline in kindness. In other words, understanding that there needs to, on the one hand, how overflowing is your kindness. On the second day, you're looking at areas in which your kindness needs to be disciplined, etc., etc. So that's as far as each portion every single day. So in the combination, of course, they're going to be 49, and each pair belongs to one day, right? Now here, if you look, it's very faint, unfortunately. I took that verse that has 49 letters, and I showed how each letter applies to each day, right? So this is Yismachu, right? I'll go back to the previous page. Here it is, Yismachu. So part of the process here, as I, so each day, you understand, I try to focus on the first day of the Omer. I'm going to focus on this word Elohim. And at the same time, I'm going to focus on this letter Yud. And then I'm also going to focus on the Ana, right? So part of this here is the realization that there is a tremendous amount of meaning, right, and significance to words and even letters, and that there is a divine component to every one of these elements, and to recognize that even if we don't understand, and of course never will, fully comprehend all the implications of these words and of our prayers and of our attempts to reach out both outwardly and heavenward and both internally as well into our own selves, and recognize the holiness that is to be discovered in all these kinds of things. So this is I'm going to stop the share here, but I wanted you to see this. It was really a wonderful discovery to realize this actually came about because of certain sidurim that I have, and I couldn't figure out what it was trying to tell me, and then I realized
All from Harriet
what it was
Radinson.
telling me. So, Judith, is this helping at all?
Yes.
So,
And how do you count the Omer every day?
so basically at night, I have a little calendar, an Omer calendar, I'm grateful to say. And so, I have in not advertising here, but this is the Siddur I use. Let's see if it's not, okay, it's not allowing me to, here we go. It's the Art Scroll Siddur. And on page 282 of the Art Scroll Siddur, they have the whole little service for counting the Omer. So, I mean, I read this essentially is what I do, and then I try to focus, as I was explaining to you, when I go through that psalm and when I go through that prayer, etc., etc. And there's also that book that I think I've shown you on counting the Omer, where he talks about this, the meaning behind each combination of Sfirot. So I'm going to stop.
What's the name of which book?
Oh, okay, I'm going to pause. Give me a moment. Hold on a second.
I'm sorry.
No problem. This is the book. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to. It's a setting that I have. Let me pause it again. Forgive me. There we go. This is the name of the book. And they have for each day, as you can see. All right, let's see. Today is the 31st day of the Omer, if I'm not mistaken. So this is what he has for the 31st day. So it's Tiferet of Hod, which means compassion in humility. Hod is considered humility, right? Tiferet is considered compassion. And he says, examine if your humility is in fact compassionate. Does my humility cause me to be self-contained and antisocial, or does it express itself in empathy for others? Is my humility balanced and beautiful, or is it awkward? Right. So, and he talks about these sorts of things. So some are more helpful than others, but it's a really interesting. If you don't have this book, I would recommend it in terms of counting the Omer. So, all right. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording here. Let me do that. Okay.